Director Easton, distinguished guests, welcome to a very special and unique conference on improving middle school science instruction using cognitive science. My name is Joe Merlino, and I will be your host and moderator for today and tomorrow. As you may know, the importance of science literacy can scarcely be overemphasized. Since the Enlightenment, science has been the antidote to all kinds of superstitions. It's been a force against all manner of tyranny, whether grounded in prejudicial notions of race, misguided religious zealotries, or irrational fears of natural phenomena or man-made technologies. It might be amusing to recall, for example, but only in retrospect, the popular objections to the steam locomotive in Pennsylvania when it first appeared in Lancaster in the early 19th century. Why, if man were meant to go 15 miles an hour, God would have certainly given him the legs to do so. In a world so dependent economically and socially on advances in the sciences, so shaped by amazing feats of engineering, whether in the expansive outer space or in the inner space of the nano world, to raise children so that they are scientifically illiterate, full of superstitions and misconceptions, which many of you have done research on, unable to appreciate both new opportunities for progress as well as the looming challenges for catastrophe, looming dangers for catastrophe, such as global climate change, does them and our country a great harm. Science illiteracy is a condition which neither they nor we can afford and must not abide if we are to long survive. While it is true that becoming scientifically literate is a learning process that needs to continue throughout one's lifetime, given the rapid advances and changes in the world, the middle grade years are a particularly critical period. As many teachers and parents know, it is during this period that a young child transitions from a naturally curious, wonder-filled bundle of excitement to a peer-focused, fashion and music-obsessed, often slacking preteen. Given the ubiquity of audio and visual distractions these days with their obsessive-compulsive, addictive white powers for consuming a child's complete attention, it is an especially daunting task for middle-grade classroom teachers to maintain and grow that inner child's innate curiosity for nature. Teaching science has never been more challenging for teachers, nor learning science more important for students than it is today. Fortunately, in the past decade, advances in the field of cognitive science have yielded important insights into the principles of learning that suggest promising methods to re-engage children in the excitement of learning. Various federal agencies have supported this work. The National Institutes of Health, the National Science Foundation have funded a number of large university-based science of learning centers. Joining this effort have been many private foundations and professional organizations. The National Academy of Sciences has synthesized much of this research into a series of publications entitled How People Learn. At the forefront of translating this basic research into effective educational interventions has been the U.S. Department of Education's Institute of Education Science, IES. Established a little more than 10 years ago, the mission of IES is to provide rigorous evidence on which to ground educational policy and practice. The purpose of us gathering today and tomorrow is to share and discuss some of the fruits of IES's investments in translating cognitive science research to education. Gathered with us is a distinguished group of cognitive scientists and psychologists who will be presenting some of their work. They will focus on 4 areas of cognitive science research. Later in the afternoon, we will feature preliminary findings from one of the largest randomized controlled trials ever conducted. In this study involving 180 middle schools, we tested the application of these 4 cognitive science principles by modifying 2 popular but very different styles of science curriculum. We will report a comparison of these cognitive science interventions against 2 control groups. The first, a business as usual group, and the second, a content-only arm of the trial. More on this later. The focus for tomorrow morning will be on how these findings can inform educational policy and future research. We look forward to a very lively discussion of our findings, which may be counterintuitive. In addition to a distinguished group of presenters, we have also a distinguished group of participants. These participants, include not only a number of renowned researchers, but also representatives from a variety of professional organizations, such as the Society for Research in Child Development and the American Psychological Association. We also have policymakers from a number of federal agencies, such as NSF, NIH, HHS, and the National Academy of Science, and of course, the Institute of Education Science. Speaking of which, it would be remiss of me if I did not publicly acknowledge and thank our program officer, Christina Chin, who for 5 years has been gently overseeing our center's work. I would also like to thank Liz Alvaro, without whose vision the National Center for Cognition and Science Instruction would not likely exist. And last but not least, at this time, I am privileged to introduce to you a man whose vision and lifetime of dedication to the proposition of excellence in education for all through evidence-based practice is well known. The Director of IES, the Honorable John Easton.
Well, thank you very much, Joe, for that nice introduction. And thanks to you and your many fine colleagues at the Center for your great work, where you've so diligently worked to embed learning principles into widely available science curricula. And also, I would like to add my thanks to yours to Liz Albro for getting this going, and for Christina for your efforts to develop and support this center. It looks like a very full day and a half ahead of you, where you'll describe more about these findings from this very large and very ambitious study. So I've heard some teasers about what's coming in these couple of days ahead, where there's some either unexpected, complex findings, or Joe called counterintuitive. Over the past year or so, I've been hearing more and more urgent cries from practitioners and policymakers for help from the education research community. At the request of the Congress, and in anticipation of reauthorizing the Institute of Education Sciences through what's called the Education Science Reform Act, the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, has been at work preparing a report on IES. They've interviewed all of us at IES, they've reviewed documents, and they've interviewed numerous researchers and educators across the country. It's very clear to me and to us at IES that they're going to be judging us on the relevance and the utility of our research. The good news is we have reached a wonderful point where the rigor and quality of our work is taken granted, thanks to people like you and thanks to the staff at IES. But now we've got to demonstrate that we can and we are helping real people solve real problems. Daily, I'm not exaggerating, we hear reports of practitioners and policymakers struggling with the implementation of higher and more demanding standards for students. What's the best professional development for teachers to help them meet these new challenges? How can we build formative assessments to support student learning? And most critical of all, how do teachers learn the instructional strategies that will bring more students to higher levels? Tom Brock, who's sitting right over there, is the new commissioner at the National Center for Education Research, is really taking this challenge to heart. And with help from many at the center, is convening a group of leading researchers to help us develop a research agenda around this topic. One issue that they will struggle with is how do we build a balanced agenda? What are the short-term questions that need addressing quickly? What are midterm issues that may take more time to address? Then finally, what are the long-term questions that we should answer for the next generation of educators? And this kind of embodies the issue for IES of getting this balance right. Just last week, last Thursday, the White House sponsored a one-day conference on promoting growth mindsets in students and adults across the country. So at the top, leadership in the White House is looking to the research community for help and guidance on this topic. How can educators apply at scale what researchers have learned about the power and promise of teaching both students and teachers that their brains can grow and that they can profit from exercising their brains? You may know that I have been calling for relevance and usability in my 4 years at IES. I never give a talk without stressing these themes. We've been promoting partnerships between researchers and practitioners and policymakers as one means towards this end. We have several grant competitions that support these partnerships, including one to evaluate state and local programs and policies, and a new topic called researcher-practitioner partnerships. Last week, we awarded several new grants on this topic. Our premise is that when researchers and practitioners are working as equal partners in defining a problem, designing a study, and interpreting findings, the practitioners will be more likely to take up the findings. We recently announced a new competition called Continuous Improvement Research in Education, which also requires researcher and practitioner partnerships. That competition will fund work not unlike what you've been doing in this Center on Cognition and Science, and that is figuring out how to apply principles derived from research into actual school settings. Going forward, IES needs to focus on the end goal, improving student learning, both cognitive skills as well as social, emotional, and psychological ones, and on making schools stronger organizations where students and teachers can thrive together. To get there, we still need to address a wide range of research questions with a wide range of methods. We need to continue to strive to understand how students process information and how to package and present that information. We have to learn how teachers can best engage students in challenging material, how they can promote oral language development, how to develop resilience and growth mindsets, and how to measure these things. There are dozens of important questions like this that we need to continue to address. So my job at IES is to keep reminding and sometimes prodding education researchers to keep in mind the end goal, improving schools and teaching and learning. The National Center on Cognition and Science Instruction has definitely been doing this, and I look forward to a full day and a half of hearing more about how you're doing it. Thanks all for being here. Thanks for your great work.
Okay. If you take a look at your conference schedule, First of all, you'll see we're on time. Hopefully we'll stay on time. We have a pretty packed agenda. But as Director Easton talked about, this is going to be pretty much a hands-on, very interactive conference. There's going to be people talking like I'm doing now, but we hope to have a very interactive discussion group as we roll this out. We have an eclectic mix here of people. We have researchers and people who have worked in the mines, so to speak, many, many years in schools, practitioners. And at this time, I'm very proud of the center and the kind of people that we have assembled for the center. And also deeply grateful to all of you who have supported and informed that work through your own research. So at this time, I just want to introduce some of my colleagues who you'll get to know, if you don't know them already, a little bit further on. So back in the corner, we have Andy Porter, Dean of the Graduate School of Education at Penn, who is heading up all of our analytics for the center. We have Chris Shun here, who is with the Learning Science Center at the University of Pittsburgh. We have Jennifer Cromley from Temple University, who does our visualization work. Nora Newcomb, who's PI of an NSF Science of Learning Center. Chris Massey at the University of Pennsylvania in their Institute of Cognitive Science Research. And did I miss? Oh, Keith Kirshner, last but not. Keith, who is responsible for all the credit in the success of this conference, and I will take all the blame if things don't go right. But he and his team have been terrific. I also at this time like to introduce the team of people, and I just have them stand up, who have been responsible for taking the work of the cognitive science researchers and introducing it and managing it in the schools. And we have 180 middle schools where we've tried to take this research and, as Director Easton said, introduce it and implement it in schools and then being able to measure the result. And the measurement, which Andy will talk about in greater detail, involved 100,000 tests of kids, hundreds of teachers, thousands of kids, and it was quite a job to manage this in 2 states and in 4 districts in Arizona, in Tucson, Phoenix, and Philadelphia. So can I just have my staff at the 21st Century Partnership for STEM Education just stand up, and these are, thank you. So the structure that we have for the conference is to first talk about the science of learning, the cognitive science aspects, which to me are extremely interesting. And we have featured 4 areas of cognitive science research. One using diagrams and visualizations, second using contrasting cases, then overcoming conceptual challenges. These are the misconception research, and then using spaced assessment. At that time, we'll have taken some breaks and we'll have a working lunch, and we have to work during lunch because it's the only way that we can pay for it. So we spent many a staff hour trying to figure out just how we would work so we could get this. But we finally got it approved, so we're good. We'll take a break after that, and of course I think we've designed these sessions, these are about an hour long, so that there will be some initial presentations and then a lot of time for conversations and Q&A. And you'll notice there's quite a number of breaks. And then at 3 o'clock, we'll present some of the center's findings. We'll describe how we roll this out and some of the ins and outs of doing that, and that's important to know that, because then at 4 o'clock, we're going to have Andy and Laura Desimone talk about the findings, which I think you'll find very interesting. We also have a poster session out there. Some of you may not have, we couldn't put everything in here, so some of that stuff is out there on the poster session. And then tomorrow, we have, after you had a chance to have dinner and maybe a drink and think about what today was, tomorrow morning we'll talk about the implications of the center, and also how we can marry the research to practice. And then the implications, we'll conclude with the implications for research by having some discussions, closing it out. So I think we have a pretty packed day.